UTIs are the worst. I've been there. One year, I had 8 UTIs. If you get UTIs, then you understand how awful the cycle can be. I was taking all the precautions, and cranberry products, they just never worked for me. I was desperate for a way to be proactive. It was hard on me and on my husband.
It was tough to see her in pain, and I wanted to help.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Spencer.
With Spencer's background in biochemistry
and our shared frustration when it came to UTIs, we were inspired to start Eucora.
At Eucora, we make innovative urinary tract supplements and UTI relief products. Our effective urinary tract supplements finally give you a way to be proactive.
Feel like you've tried everything? We get it. We have a money-back guarantee so you can try risk-free. If you're not happy, you'll get a full refund.
We're on a mission to help women get their lives back. Ready to join them?
Get 30% off Eucora when you go to eucora.com/audio. That's eucora.com/audio.
Frank Sinatra was more than a singer. He was a vibe. The velvet voice, the perfectly tousled hair, the effortless swagger that made him the original blueprint for what we now call cool. He wasn't just famous, he was untouchable. Sinatra could sell out a stadium on Saturday night and then crash someone's wedding on Sunday, probably leaving with a better party favor than the bride and the groom. But here's the thing about being larger than life. People start to talk. And when it came to Sinatra, the whispers weren't just about his music or his love life, though there was plenty to whisper about there too. No, we're talking mob rumors, as in, was Frank Sinatra just the smooth-talking crooner everyone adored, or was he also the guy you'd call if you needed a favor that couldn't exactly be discussed over the phone? The idea that Sinatra had ties to the mob is one of those stories that refuses to die, partly because it's fascinating, and partly because, well, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? He had the connections, the charisma, and that air of don't ask too many questions about him. Today we're unraveling the decades-old speculation. How did a kid from Hoboken with a golden voice end up with his name swirling around in FBI files and mob lore? And does any of it really matter? Stick around because by the end of this, you might just see old Blue Eyes in a whole new light. Or maybe you'll just love him more for the mystery. Frank Sinatra didn't stroll into fame. He scraped, sang, and schmoozed his way there. Born in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1915, Sinatra came into the world with one clear advantage: that voice. It wasn't long before the scrappy kid from the docks found himself crooning his way out of small-time gigs and right into the big leagues. By the 1940s, Frank was everywhere. Radio, stage, swooning fans, and the kind of headlines you'd expect from a man who made love songs feel like personal confessions. But let's not forget this is the music business, and nothing in showbiz comes without strings, or in this case, contracts. Early in his career, Sinatra was tied to bandleader Tommy Dorsey, and by tied, I mean Dorsey basically owned him. Sinatra's contract was notoriously restrictive, with Dorsey taking a whopping 43% cut of everything Sinatra made. To put that into perspective, it's like a roommate who eats half your groceries and charges you rent for the privilege. Enter the whispers. The story goes that Sinatra wanted out of this deal, and who wouldn't? Honestly, 43% is a ripoff. And let's just say he didn't rely on a strongly worded email to make it happen. According to legend, a few well-connected gentlemen, allegedly with mob ties, air quotes, encouraged Dorsey to release Frank Sinatra from his contract. And by encouraged, I mean they might have made an offer Dorsey couldn't refuse. One version even claims a gun was involved, but that might just be Hollywood flair. Either way, Dorsey did let Frank Sinatra go, and Frank's career skyrocketed shortly after. Coincidence? Maybe. Convenient? Absolutely. This story marked the beginning of the Sinatra mob connection. A tale of favors exchanged, debts owed, and a singer whose rise to stardom wasn't just about hitting high notes. Was it just business as usual in the rough and tumble entertainment world, Or was Sinatra already getting cozy with some very powerful friends? The rumors started here, and they never really stopped. By the time Sinatra hit his stride, America was living its post-World War II best, or at least pretending to. Vegas was rising out of the desert like a glittering, sweaty mirage. The entertainment industry was booming, and behind it all was the shadowy hand of the mob. These weren't just the guys from the dime store crime novels. These were larger-than-life characters who ran everything from casinos to political campaigns. And if you were anyone in entertainment, you were bound to cross paths with them. Sinatra, he didn't just cross paths. He threw parties. Sinatra wasn't shy about his friendships, which included names that belonged more on FBI surveillance reports than on a party guest list. Sam Giancana, Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, these weren't just guys with flashy nicknames. They were the architects of organized crime in America. And Frank, he was right there, smoozing, singing, and soaking it all in. The Rat Pack days in Vegas were a fever dream of glitz and glamour, but they were also ground zero for some of the most persistent Sinatra mob rumors. Sinatra was a regular fixture at mob-controlled casinos, crooning in front of sold-out crowds by night, rubbing elbows with the businessmen by day. And the FBI? Oh, they noticed. By the 1950s, they'd amassed a file on Sinatra that could double as a doorstop. 2,400 pages of observations and rumors and reports that painted him as more than a charming singer. There's one persistent story about Sinatra meeting with Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss, and treating it like a friendly coffee date. Sinatra always brushed it off as harmless. He knew everyone, he said. He was a people person, the ultimate host. But come on, how many people know that guy? The big question here is whether Sinatra was a Hollywood star who found himself in the orbit of powerful criminals, or if he was something more. Did he cozy up to these men out of necessity to ensure his place at the top of the entertainment world, or was he a little too comfortable in their company? Now let's get to the meat of it. The stories that keep this Sinatra mob connection alive. Think of it as the highlight reel of Frank's most eyebrow-raising moments. Let's start with 1947, the year Sinatra took a little trip to Havana. At the time, Cuba was basically Las Vegas's slightly shadier cousin, with casinos, nightlife, and mob bosses roaming the same streets. While there, Frank was photographed with Lucky Luciano, a name synonymous with organized crime. Was it a coincidence? Sinatra claimed he was just there for some R&R, but the fact that he was carrying a suitcase allegedly full of cash, reportedly for Luciano, did not help his case. Not exactly your typical tourist activity, unless your idea of sightseeing involves bribery and mob bosses. Then there's Sinatra's connection to Las Vegas itself. Frank wasn't just a performer, he became part owner of the Cal Neva Lodge, a swanky resort and casino perched on the Nevada-California border. The Cal Neva was glamorous, sure, but it also had a reputation as being a mob spot. The FBI files suggest that mob meetings took place right under Sinatra's nose, or maybe even with his blessing. Sinatra always denied knowing anything, of course, but let's just say the Cal Neva wasn't exactly a place for wholesome family vacations. And now, the biggie. The JFK connection. Sinatra was famously close to John F. Kennedy, a friendship forged over mutual charm, good looks, and apparently a willingness to look the other way. Sinatra allegedly helped introduce JFK to Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss, in an effort to secure votes for the 1960 presidential election. The story feels like something ripped from a mob movie, but there are enough credible sources to make you wonder. The idea that Sinatra might have played matchmaker between the Kennedys and the mob is almost too wild to believe. Almost. These stories are what give the Sinatra mob connection its staying power. They're tantalizing, outrageous, and just plausible enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about Old Blue Eyes. But are they proof of anything? Or are they just juicy anecdotes that make Sinatra's life seem like the greatest crime drama never filmed? Now, of course, not everyone bought into the idea that Frank Sinatra was some kind of mafia middleman. For every scandal and shady photograph, there's an equally vocal chorus of people, and Frank himself saying, "Come on, really?" Sinatra consistently denied any mob involvement throughout his life. Sure, he admitted to knowing some of these guys, but how could he not? He was Frank Sinatra, for crying out loud. He knew everyone who was anyone, from presidents to gangsters to that guy who probably sold bootleg cigars in the back alley. Sinatra always maintained that his mob ties were exaggerated by the press, the FBI, and let's face it, anyone who wanted to make his life sound a little bit like a noir film. And let's talk evidence, or the lack thereof. Despite the FBI's impressive filing system and years of following Sinatra around like groupies with notepads, they never really managed to pin anything substantial on him. Most of the accusations are circumstantial at best and gossip at worst. Sinatra himself once quipped, "If I'd done half of what I've been accused of, I'd be dead by now, or running the country." Then there's Sinatra's softer side. For all the tough guy imagery and rumors of shady deals, he was also a generous philanthropist, known for quietly donating to causes and helping people in need. He worked with civil rights organizations, raised millions for charity, and he was fiercely loyal to his friends and family. Is that the profile of a mobbed-up criminal mastermind? Maybe, maybe not. And let's be honest, Sinatra had a face and a presence that could talk its way out of almost anything. Whether it was a booking agent, a movie director, or a mob boss, people just seemed to want to say yes to Frank Sinatra. Was he guilty of anything more than being irresistible? That's up for debate. So what's the verdict on Frank Sinatra and his alleged mob connections? The evidence is murky, the stories are sensational, and the truth lies somewhere between a smoky casino floor and a dimly lit FBI office. Did he really help mob bosses launder money, secure political favors, and turn Vegas into a criminal playground? Or was he just a guy who happened to know everyone, from mobsters to mayors, thanks to his larger-than-life status? And here's the real question. Does it even matter? Even if Sinatra brushed elbows with some of the questionable characters, does it tarnish his legacy as an artist? The man who gave us some of the most iconic music of the 20th century, set the standard for cool, and somehow made a Trilby hat look good? That's not easy to do. Frank Sinatra's life was as much about the myth as the man, and maybe that's why these rumors endure. The intrigue, the glamour, the possibility that there was more to Frank than we saw on stage, and it all adds to his mystique. And maybe that's the way he wanted it. After all, this was the guy who famously said, "I did it my way." Whether that way involved the mob is for you to decide. Thanks for listening to this episode of 10 Minute Mystery. If you enjoyed it, tap the subscribe button now and also leave a review. It helps more curious minds discover the show. And if you're hungry for more stories like this, maybe a little creepier, check out my other podcast, 10 Minute Murder, where I dive into true crime stories that are brief, bingeable, but more murdery. See you next time.